Hello, everybody. This is Seth, Head of Operations at QUOINE. And this evening, I am joined by Babu Munagala, who is the CEO and founder of the Zebi project. Babu, welcome.
Hi, Seth. Thank you for having me here. Excited to be here.
And I'm really glad to have this opportunity to talk about the project. First off, let me just get some of the administrative stuff out of the way. So the Zebi project is something we're very proud to be partnering with here at QUOINE. There's lots of tokens out in the world. There's very few tokens out in the world that are actually really making a difference. And that's exactly what the Zebi project is doing. We're going to be listing the token ZCO on Cryptos this coming Sunday, April 29th at 11:30 a.m. JST. And we're really excited to have the listing. It will be the first listing for the ZCO token. And probably even more importantly, what we're most excited about, and I can't wait to get into it with you, Babu, is about how you've really created a working ecosystem for real demand and use of ZCO today. So,
absolutely. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the positive words, Seth.
Of course, of course. So, Babu, let's start off with this. I think it'd be great for you to tell, you know, the QUOINE family a little bit about yourself and your background before you started getting involved in the Zebi project.
Sure. So I finished my BTech in IIT Madras, and IITs are the #1 universities in India and one of the top universities across the world. And I did a master's in Ohio State University in computer science, and the BTech was in aerospace engineering, interestingly, because before joining the bachelor's, I was very fascinated by aeroplanes, flying, so I thought I'll experiment that. But I guess once I got into the school, I realized programming and computer science is really what I actually loved, and I moved into computer science. And I worked in the Bay Area for almost 18 years, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and we started Zebi just about 3 years ago.
Okay, and so what was sort of your inspiration for getting into blockchain?
Interestingly, we didn't actually think of blockchain at all when we started Zebi. So Zebi comes from Zebi byte, very, very big number, 1 trillion gigabytes. We wanted to solve various aspects of big data, right? And across the world, a lot of data is getting created. And just in India, by 2020, India will have more than 3 zebibytes of data. And that's 3 trillion gigabytes. Each gigabyte is like a movie. So imagine, trillion movies. Obviously, a single human cannot watch or see or read any of that information. But there is a lot of value in most of the big data. And how do we make use of the data for improving citizen experience or improving customer experience? And within a few months, we realized that security is a huge problem. And interestingly, at QUOINE, you guys talk about security and regulation. There's kind of a common thread between QUOINE and Zebi. Right? So we were looking, how do you protect data? And when data is such a highly valuable asset, and while it's needed by most of the employees, right? The database administrators really have full access typically. They know the passwords, they know the architecture to do their job. But at the same time, the updates to data, can they be protected beyond any human intervention? That's the fundamental question that we asked. And they were obviously hardware solutions, but not really suitable for big data, right? They're very, very expensive. And then we stumbled on blockchain late 2015. Right, and from 16 onwards, from January, February 2016 onwards, we really loved it. Obviously, anyone that hears about blockchain, they have to love it. It's so new, it's so simple. At the same time, very, very powerful, very pervasive. It can transform so many different industries. Right? It's not specific to any one industry. Although initially it's used for payment processing or money transfers, but the fundamental blockchain technology, having the immutability, having the tamper-proof functionality, that's beyond any human intervention. That's what we use in blockchain.
Right. So let's talk about the first use case that you and the project team have really been able to bring forward using the Zebi protocol and the ZCO token. And I think it'd be great to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, the way we build the platform, it's completely data model agnostic. It doesn't really care. The core of Zebi chain, we call it, is it doesn't care about whether it's land records or education records, employment records, hotel visitor records, police records, bank transaction records, right? But at the same time, obviously, you have to have small layers to make sure the APIs are properly structured and it's integrated with each of the systems, right? And we felt land records is a huge thing, especially in a property records, essentially, right? Asset ownership is a huge thing in India because more than 65% of all the pending court cases are because of a dispute related to a property, property ownership between families, between individuals. And it continues to get worse. And we felt that overall data security and the need for data protection, tamper-proofing beyond any human intervention, that's probably most important for property records. That's what we tackled. And we saw a few governments that are very passionate, that are very forward-looking, very enthusiastic to adopt new technologies. Just because of their own, there are very, very visionary leaders in some of these Indian states. And the Indian government of India at the central level itself is launching many initiatives, since 2014, after the, relatively modern-looking political parties came into power. Many government initiatives came, and we saw that, that's a great opportunity, and that's what we focused on in the first few months of finishing the blockchain product.
I read read Don Tapscott's Blockchain Revolution, and there was an economist, I believe, I forget which country, I think it was some country in South America. He said probably the lack of indisputable ownership to land title is probably the single biggest factor leading to poverty in the developing world.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's exactly what sort of the first use case that you've used with your data agnostic model. So can you talk a little bit about, the project that you partnered with the state government in India?
Yeah, sure. So Andhra Pradesh government, like I said, they're looking for blockchain partners. And there are few companies, there is some competition in India and across the world when it comes to blockchain protecting land records. And our unique differentiator is we are futuristic. We want to make a big difference. But at the same time, we know that we have to take small steps. You can't just jump into the future, but you have to take the first step, integrate with existing government software, because they already have a system. Yeah, they already have protocols on how property ownership changes hands, how government officers are involved. So we really stayed focused on providing a particular feature that we're calling as tamper-proof. Once data comes into Zebi blockchain, essentially nobody can tamper, nobody can manipulate the immutable ledger. Not even government officers, not even Zebi employees, no human, essentially. Mm-hmm. That's what the government officers really liked, and that's why we're able to make progress quickly within a few months to integrate with their system and get that completely live. So right now, the Capital Region Development Authority, that's a department within the state, Andhra Pradesh state. That's one of the large states in India. They use that, and they, all of the property owners, the citizens that own a property, they can get real-time, confirmed, validated information directly from the source, directly from the blockchain system.
So take me through, let's say, the user experience. Let's say you have title to a piece of land, and do you actually get a copy of the document with, say, a QR code on it, which you can scan, then access the actual original or digital facsimile of that document that's stored on the blockchain, or at least access via the blockchain? Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly the way it's done. And it may look like, okay, why do you still need paper documents, right? Again, you have to remember that these are people living in small villages, relatively small towns. So the government still want to give them something that they can relate to, something that, that they can show, that they can put in a locker, that they can really, get a, perception of ownership, right? But at the same time, if something is tampered or changed in the backend server, they have to know, and they can know it very, very quickly. And like you mentioned, QR code is the exact idea that we used. And this idea actually came to the government. I mean, think about it. We actually were focusing so much on blockchain technology, we didn't actually directly think of the QR code idea. But one of the government officers said, we have to give an interface where it's super convenient for the citizens to access and check who's the owner of my property. And that's what we did. Essentially, as an owner of the property, all they have to do is, open up their smartphone. Any default QR code application is enough, right? And they can get the latest information from blockchain.
So now, in terms of who has the ability to change the source document, so I'm assuming the government authorities, the trusted source, they still have the ability to make an update to that document, correct? You mentioned that the property owner, let's using this example, they would at least be notified if there was some change of the document that's stored on the blockchain. Tell us a little bit of how that works.
Yeah. So there is a digital signature of the government officer that's approving any change, right? That's recorded on the blockchain. And because it's distributed, there are multiple nodes within the blockchain. So if a government officer maliciously makes a change, yes, that's allowed. But their digital signature is printed on the blockchain. So if there is any audit or something happens, they cannot pretend innocence. So we know exactly which officer signed, and we know exactly when it's done, and that cannot be deleted or changed. The ownership can again change back to the current owner or a different owner. But all the history, just like in any typical blockchain, the history becomes immutable.
So on the blockchain, do we keep the hash of the file accessible, so then you can go back and see, like you said, the immutable record of the history of that document?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, there is a hash at the transaction level and at the block level. We do that. What my VP of engineering calls as double hashing. So there is, I think typical blockchain only has cumulative hashing at the block level, not at the transaction level. Just for the added protection, we do that at the both levels.
Got it. Okay. And so, as you're thinking from use case, what is sort of other use cases where people are approaching you, or you're thinking about sort of spotlight projects to leverage this ecosystem?
Sure. I mean, land records or property records is probably the most obvious, most impactful, because that needs like almost no convincing, right? People just get it immediately. And we're talking to multiple countries. There is a consortium that we're part of in UK. One of the consortium leaders, actually, they approached us and said, "Oh, okay, you have a great blockchain solution, and we are planning to submit a bid to UK land records project." And they have a great background. They have existing relationship of working with the governments. So that will be a big win-win, because they know how to work with the government. They know how to take care of the government procedures, and we have the blockchain technology. And combined with that, essentially we can blockchain protect land records, within UK and within London.
Sure.
And other use cases, you're talking about other use cases. Do you want to just talk about other industries as well?
I just have one more question on this topic, and then we'll talk about, because I know the technology and the platform, there's many other records, and we'll get to there. But just on the land records, I think there's a really interesting point. Is I first talked to you about the project. I just want to share it with you and get your views, is there an opportunity here to actually materially save in the cost of transacting? In other words, for land records specifically, a big part of the transactional cost in the real estate business is you have to do title searches and title insurance. With
that's a good point.
The ability to store the records transparently and immutably on a blockchain, does this then sort of lessen the requirement to do long title searches and reduce the cost of doing title searches and less need for title insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think India has an opportunity to really leapfrog, right? I mean, there's no such thing as title insurance right now. And the cost of taking a loan, for example, it's very high. The interest rates are very high because the trust level is low, right? The default rates are high. So the overall interest rates, when a bank gives a loan for a house or for a property, because the confidence level that, oh, this property is actually owned by this person is low, they have to give a higher rate to mitigate the risk of defaults. So what I expect is a complete transformation, right? We're talking to a title insurance company as well. You know, I can't give you the name right now because it's not public information. They are looking at how do I, essentially start a new industry that doesn't exist in India. I mean, title insurance is very popular in US. And I'm sure it's established in many other developed countries, right? But it doesn't. There's no such thing in India, mainly because how do you insure when there is no clarity of ownership at all? Right? And what we are doing is a foundation layer. Zebi blockchain is essentially the platform that will enable these types of applications to be created on the platform and make use of the highly reliable, highly trustable data.
Great. So let's move on to some other use cases. Maybe you could draw out for everyone, say a use case, a diploma. You want to validate that someone actually they went to the University of Illinois, and how would that work in practice using this blockchain?
I mean, so in the typical regular case, what happens is if somebody applies to, I guess somebody completed a degree in the University of Illinois. That's what you're implying, right?
Yes.
They got the degree, right? I guess even right now it's still a paper degree, right? And if they're doing further studies like a PhD in a different university, they still need to submit the paper transcript, right? It's manual, and there is a little bit of room for tampering or fraud because the paper documents needs to be verified by a phone call or something else to the other university, right? So, but when we put degree certificates on blockchain, first of all, becomes completely immutable. And there is a level of transparency that can be brought in depending on how we design the smart contract, right? Which data elements can we make it public? Which data elements we want to actually keep confidential, and only the individual person can see those elements because it's their private data, right? And in that sense, MIT has done a few pilots on blockchain. They issued their own degree certificates on blockchain, right? And what we are doing is a much broader one. It's not specific to one education university or one government. So currently it's a private blockchain. And the way, we intentionally kept it as a private blockchain to get more adoption into the blockchain. And as we get more traction and more nodes in the private blockchain, we plan to make it completely public by end of next year. And at that time, if a university wants to essentially join, they could just become a node in the blockchain, and it could be almost self-service, right?
Right, and that's a key point that you touched on. So it brings me to my next topic about scalability. So what we've done here is actually a permissioned blockchain. So tell me the thing about that in sort of your mechanism for allowing participants to become a node on the Zebi blockchain.
So right now it's based on proof of authority, right? As it's known as QOA. That's the consensus mechanism. But we have, as we plan to make it public, we are brainstorming on what is the real. Obviously, we're not looking at proof of work, not the typical mining one. That's not applicable, or it's too costly, right? But there are multiple proof of stake algorithms, protocols that are very popular in the industry. We are evaluating a few. We like a couple of ideas, but I cannot disclose anything because these are very early stage design discussions. But we will most likely have a POS, proof of stake protocol to manage the consensus and approval and creation of new blocks onto the public blockchain.
Understood. So I'm also really glad to hear that we're talking about proof of stake. I believe that's the right way going forward. Different sets of mechanisms. sometimes I think of proof of work as the equivalent of a horse and buggy, but really the world has moved on to electric cars, right?
That's that's a nice analogy, right? Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the token economics and how does ZCO, how are people using it in this ecosystem? How are people earning it? Who's receiving it? Take us through that.
Yeah, sure. So there are three types of fees on the blockchain, Zebi blockchain platform, right? One is for the data protection itself, as the data provider or the data custodian that owns the data, because the blockchain is able to protect them and give them the high level of immutability and complete tamper-proof. They pay a fee to protect the data and store the data on the blockchain. And then there is a fee for the data transactions, and these are applicable in some industries like land records, for example, because these are very high-value transactions. Even a small blockchain fee would give the level of guarantee to both the buyer and seller that it's being put on the blockchain, the transaction itself, and they'll be willing to pay a fee that can be paid in Zebi coins as well. And the last one, probably the most scalable and most pervasive one, is the data access fee, right? For example, a bank wants to access and make sure that this is the real property owned by this particular person, and it was never tampered with. And they pay a small fee to access the data and issue a loan. And similar thing for example, title insurance company, right? They would want to make sure that the data that they're relying on to give insurance and guarantee the full coverage of the property, they can use again these APIs to pay a small fee, and that can also be paid in Zebi coins.
And so for the data access, who's actually receiving the ZCO tokens as the recipient?
I guess it's the Zebi company right now.
Okay.
So when we make it completely public, that's a model that we have to make sure there is a level of decentralization that we can put into place. Because it's a private blockchain right now, the company is receiving the Zebi coins.
Gotcha. Great. So let's talk about the next major milestones that you see in the Zebi project. What's on the horizon?
Yeah, immediately on the horizon is we already finished the data production side. The APIs as what we call as instant data exchange, data as a service API, essentially REST APIs that can be accessed programmatically as part of business automation or as an individual just accessing one record, right? All of these, that's in the works. That's what we'll plan to integrate and announce in the coming months. Right? Obviously, the long-term, biggest one is the public blockchain. That's slated for next year. And there is something called Zebi Pay that we have in the pipeline, I think early 19, is where how do you make sure that the person in India or the person in the country, if they're not that familiar with cryptos and or cryptocurrencies, and if the platform is only accepting Zebi coin, but this person or this this individual or this institution or this enterprise, they only want to pay in fiat, right? So that's where Zebi Pay will bridge the gap between the fiat and the crypto.
Sure. And potentially you can connect in the back end with a high-end, highly secure exchange like QUOINE or by June Liquid.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great segue. Yes, I read more about the Liquid platform, and it's even more impressive. I heard a little bit about Liquid a few weeks ago, but I read a little bit more today, just before the AMA, and very, 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 very exciting. A lot of brand new features built, and I think your CEO's vision of taking cryptocurrencies to common man, that's the way to do it. You guys are showing it in action. I'm very proud of that project.
Well said, and I think that's why this is a great partnership, and we're really happy to, like I said, be listing ZCO on Sunday. And last question before I let you go, Babu, tell us a little bit about the blockchain scene in India. Where is the government in terms of regulations? What is the exchange framework like? Where is sort of the adoption and the awareness of crypto in India today?
I think awareness is growing. There is I think India is generating I don't know the exact number, but a large percentage of all crypto transactions, right? But the government is very, very cautious, very, very conservative, right? And probably rightly so. And so RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, they have issued a very one-sided ban on all cryptos, where they said, okay, financial institution, you're not allowed to deal with any exchange, anybody that works with cryptocurrencies, and that's
Right.
actually being questioned. There is one exchange already filed a counter lawsuit in Delhi High Court saying that's completely illegal according to the constitution, and that cannot be done. They cannot slow the innovation. But at the same time, interestingly, RBI in the same circular, they did say they want to promote blockchain as a technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel, this is my personal feeling. What they really want to do is they want to keep a hold on it. They want to make sure. I mean, they clearly said they're very worried about the two things, right? One is the anti-money laundering, right? AML, and the second is the innocent people losing money because they are investing in ICOs, that are really not good projects, right? So they're really making sure that one, people don't lose money by buying cryptocurrency, and second, illegal money doesn't come in and people pay taxes, right? So Zebi, we are very conscious. We did strict KYC and all the participants. We even returned funds for a few KYC for a few participants that actually chose to not give us the full KYC. So that's very, very rare in ICO and cryptocurrency space, and that just shows how serious we are. Again, that's the strength of coin and cryptos as well. That you guys are serious about regulations. I think as long as we understand what the government wants, as long as it's a fair regulation, we want to follow it and support the government.
Absolutely. So, I've said it several times, and I think, you're acting in thinking about things the same way as us, which is, the best way to bring crypto to the mainstream is not running from regulators in, far off islands, but actually working with regulators. And that is the best path for adoption.
Absolutely. Very nicely said, Seth. Yeah.
Great. Well, Babu, thanks very much for joining us this evening. And we're really looking forward to the listing. And hey, in 6 months, when you have your next big breakthrough in the project, we'd be happy to have you back and get an update on where we are.
Excellent. Will do. Again, thank you, Seth, and thank you for all of the COINEX and CrypTos team. Thank you, guys.